perfect. So I don't like to talk for people because why?
Yep.
Do you want to just give everyone who's obviously listening, whether it's people who own startups, who are engineers currently or looking for a role in engineering, what your kind of background is and where you've got to where you are right now?
Yep.
Yeah?
I'll start at the beginning. So I'm not quite at the beginning, but I started my own construction company doing specialist roofing materials back in 2003-04. Very much so. And I ran that successfully for 12, 13 years. Navigated the financial crisis, did really, really well. Built an incredible bunch of people, incredible teams of people that were out, and we've got a really good reputation in the market for doing what we said we were going to do. Playing different to most of the construction industry in terms of how we operated. For some reason, towards probably a year before it went, we got really quiet. And I took a contract on that had every alarm bell in my head going off at the time, but we were really quiet. I didn't want to lose the guys that we got built together, and it went the way it was always going to go. So that meant I lost absolutely everything, which I wouldn't change. If I could go back in time, I would live everything as I've done it, because I think I am 1,000 times better as a person, as a leader, having gone through all of that than had I not done so. Then went into specialist steels, foundry work, refractory materials. Did that successfully for 6 years, and just always anchoring after doing something different.
Very ambitious.
Yes.
Ambitious.
Just wanted to do something different, and startups were a thing and have always been a thing, but thinking back to 2016, 17, 18, there were lots of examples of startups that were raising serious amounts of money, that were doing a lot of different things, and that kind of struck a chord with me, because I want to break them all. I don't want to stick doing the same things day in, day out. So I got the opportunity to go and work for Luna Supply Technologies.
Just before.
So which was incredibly exciting. 4 years of graft, hard work. Ultimately building teams of people that covered all sorts from procurement, production, everything that's encompassed under the umbrella of operations. Loved it, loved the project, loved the people. Assembled teams of people that didn't fail to deliver on what they needed to do.
Really good bunch of people.
Incredibly proud of them. Still speak to many of them most weeks. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out, which was a massive shame on lots of different levels. Not only because of the effort and the effort that everybody had put in, but because the project, I think, was worth it. But unfortunately,
it was exciting. There was so much going on, and it had so much potential.
It's the way of the world. But what it did do, I kind of like to reflect a lot. Given the community I do every day, I get plenty of chance to do that. But it allowed me to, a bit of a deep dive as to, hang on, what did we do wrong? What could we have done different and better? And then the opportunity to go into Ally and step up into the COO role meant that I'm actually at a position to work with Jonathan, CEO, and lay out what the company needs to do and how it needs to do it, very much aligned in what we think is right and what is good. Albeit in a very much more challenging environment, because we're not in the world where you can go out and raise 200, 300, 400 million and billions in some cases, as many startups did. If you anything to do with hardware now and innovation, then the investment landscape is a very challenging area for lots of different reasons.
Gotten harder, hasn't it?
Massively.
In the last 5 years, I would say.
AI. You could go and do what those other companies have done in the past and raise a lot of money, but it really irks me that, because what we're going to do, just everybody's going to be tapping computer screens.
The thing is that tapping the computer screen it removes your critical thinking. People just assume everything that comes out of AI is correct, but you've still got to read through it and make sure it makes sense. Unless you know what you're talking about, you're not going to know what's right and what's wrong.
No, definitely not. And worse than that, it means that we've got people that aren't really, whether they're computer literate or whether they're academic. What are they going to do? What can we do? So for me, I'm still passionate about manufacturing. The model has to change. I don't think we'll ever see the days of mass, huge mega factories producing one thing or a few things, but I think very much more localised, smaller hubs manufacturing we should be focusing on. But ultimately it's going to be tough because you're not going to get the investment. And that's not all because of companies that have failed. It's we've got geopolitical issues, and the political landscape in general doesn't give many people confidence in what we're trying to do. But so that means that bootstrapping it as much as you can, raising what you can, and bootstrapping the rest of the way, all feeds into these environments are not for the faint of heart in any way, shape or form. No. You have to be a certain type of person. I say frequently when I'm interviewing people, if you enjoy working in this environment, there's something broken.
But you love chaos. You've been in it for a while now.
Yes.
So I feel like you learn more. What would you say was, because obviously you've come from a totally different background when before you came into Luna, what do you think the most challenging thing was for you going from the environment you were in before to that? What was kind of like a shock to you?
I'm a list guy, so I have historically all my life written a list of what I'm going to do that day, and the most challenging thing for me personally that I had a real trouble trying to find a way around the effect it was having on me was because my mindset is if I go home with anything left on that list, I failed in that day. That's historically how I worked. And working in startups, you'll create the list, you'll walk into work, and 5 minutes later that list is completely out of the window, and you're dealing with something completely unexpected, or whatever, like you say, firefighting in chaos. And I found myself going home at the end of the day and at night, really beating myself up for the fact that I hadn't done what I needed to do in the day. And that creating a mindset in which I could actually, ignore that. What did you do?
Yeah.
Because I've not been ineffective all day. I have made things work and done stuff. So what were those things? And making sure you take the time to reflect on it, because this world will beat you up quicker than you can blink. So you have to find alternative ways of dealing with the ups and the downs.
What's the difference from Luna to Ally in terms of kind of the pace? Because I'm assuming it's a little bit different because obviously Ally's mainly bootstrapped. Am I right in saying that?
We've got some really good investors on board, but the reality of it is, I think gone are the days, and I'm a fan of engineer and fail fast. I always have been. Whatever you do, whether it's engineering or not, make mistakes as quick as you can and learn from them as quick as you can. Making sure you do learn from them. Don't make the same ones twice. But I think the reality of it is, going back to the comment I made, the difference between the two in Luna's, and again not picking on what we did because we were doing it for the right reasons at the right time, and it was all funded at that time, is in this day and age you have to, everybody's operating at 200, 300, 400%. Everybody's doing way more than is traditionally expected. That goes back to the type of personality you need to be to work in these environments, is that if you're extremely ambitious, if you want to make a difference, if you want to do something different, break the mould, or whatever it be, there could be a load of different reasons you might thrive in this environment. The risks are really high, and they're higher than they've ever been, but the rewards are equally higher than they've ever been. And for me, I've said it to a few people recently, this is as close as I think I'll ever get to, that last hurdle from startup to scale. We're on that, and which is great. It's the hardest hurdle we'll ever have to climb, ever. And getting over it is, even now, as though we're as close as we are, it's still really, really difficult. And but you've got to dig in. You've got to have that resilience. You've got to be very tenacious. You've got to be able to, see through all of the chaos, and because what you can't do is get dragged into it and then not keep looking up to see what's we want to go over there, but by the time you raise your head you're over there.
No, it's really true. With the guys you have in the team, do you find, because my take on this is, don't hire people to do just one tiny job, especially when you're scaling or you're a startup. It should be people who are multi-skills. Is that how you've kind of, yourself and John have built Ally? Like, is that?
Yeah, definitely. So we're very much aligned. We very much the same kind of thinking in terms of, again, gone are the days in which you could go into a company, whether it be a startup or not, and just focus on one thing. In the corporate world, you probably get away with that. In the startup world, you definitely won't. You can't
hide in a corner, can you?
No, and we spend more time looking for people that are not afraid to get their hands dirty. You know, look, see how I'm dressed today.
You do. You do everything from driving the van.
But you've got to do. You know, for me, that's about protecting the team, allowing them the bandwidth and the freedom to do the job that we need doing on that day, whatever that job might be, whether it's in their wheelhouse or not. That's our role. Our role is to facilitate them being successful in what they need to do. But this one-dimensional, traditional one-dimensional kind of skill set doesn't work. You know, you need to be able to come in. You need to be open to trying your hand at anything, and that's not because we're trying to flog people to death. It's purely just the needs of the business at the time. I spend as much time trying to put people off when I interview them than I do trying to sell it.
But you need to. I think they need to understand what it's like to work in a startup. Because they start shiny. It's going to be so much fun, and it is fun. But it's also very, very stressful. It
is.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Well, I put it a little bit different. So I've got two different. I put stress and pressure in two different pockets. Okay. And this is me. So
you're right. Actually, certainly don't know. I get.
So how I determine which one's which. If it's something I can affect change on, whether it's in my wheelhouse or not. If it's something I can, actively go out and try to make better in whatever way I can, that's pressure. Yeah.
That's my favorite.
If it's something that's completely outside of my comfort zone, something I've got absolutely zero chance of trying to fix, that's stress. And stress is good for nobody. So we kind of look for people that we can, overlap. Yeah. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. So in terms of what they're able to do, they might come in to be a control systems engineer, but they might also have done some back-end or front-end stuff. Having some people with a little bit of information, they understand it, the basics, because that then will help the people whose core responsibility is that job to get over the whatever's in front of us. Kind of like that Venn diagram. So you're going to spend 80-90% of your time doing your core role. But if you've got the ability to either a little bit about it, or you've got it within you to learn a little bit quick to help out, it's that like 10-20% that provides support to the rest of the team.
Nice. With graduates coming out of uni looking for jobs, speak to quite a few, and I always say to them, some of them have so many different opportunities. So some of them are big corporate, like you've got the JLRs, you've got big fancy companies, right? Then you've got the smaller businesses that I like to work with. I feel like you get more out of them. That's my own opinion on that. I feel like as an engineer, if you want to learn and you want to be thrown in the deep end and pick things up at a faster pace, smaller businesses are probably where I would probably go. What would you say to graduates who are coming out that aren't sure exactly what they want to do within the engineering world? Would you say to them, go to a big organisation, go,
It's down to the person and their attitude and how their personality is made up. If you want to be exposed, you're coming to be an engineer, mechanical engineer, let's say. But if you want to be exposed to a multitude of other different disciplines and areas and opportunities within the business, there is no better place to get what I consider to be the best foundations you will ever lay that will set you up on a path to be successful in the future. You walk into an environment like ours, there's not one person in that eye that just focuses on one job. I've got a project engineer who came in to do a specific job. So far in the last couple of weeks alone, he's been on helping build. He's then gone off and done, supported some of the manufacturing engineering roles or tasks that we've got going on. I've asked him to start putting some other plans together for something completely different. He would never have that kind of exposure in a big corporate environment, and that's for a very good reason. They've got their structures in place and they've been successful, but startups just can't operate in that way. So if you're really ambitious, I think, I might have a biased view, but if you want to set yourself up for your best future, getting the exposure in a startup, especially an early stage startup or one in this day and age, there is no better environment. You have to be really resilient.
You do. I think it depends on that. You can tell from when you're sat with somebody whether they will be able to do that or not. How do you pick the people that you interview? So is it, obviously you probably see a CV first, right? Is it based on degrees? Is it based on experience? Is it based on extracurricular things that they might be doing in their own time? Like, how do you pinpoint who's best to...
You're always going to look for the core skill set. What are they into, and what can they bring, and what can they provide to the business? For me, none of that matters. It's about the personality. It's about how they behave. The behavioural traits. Always look really fondly over applicants that have got something outside of work, or whether that be they're doing their own projects, whether that be they're into some kind of sports, team sports, particularly. And the reason for that is that I think it's a level of discipline or self-discipline they've already got baked into them, and they know about teamwork, they know the importance of making sure we're all pulling in the same direction, and people get a little bit surprised because we have, and I'm passionate about a very open and transparent culture. Some people get frightened to death by that. They cannot handle that for the level of transparency that we do. But again, I think at that point they're probably not right for the environment that we live in. You need to be able to deal with the tough conversations. You need to be able to be open and honest. Neither of us have got time for micromanagement. We bring people in because we trust that they can do it. We make very clear what it is we want doing. I don't care how they do it. It's genuinely to get it done. I trust, that trust and accountability. For me, it's trusting they've got the minerals to do the job. Trusting that if they're in trouble or they've got a problem, they're going to shout loud. Because just the nature of where we are, I haven't got time for it, and that sounds bad.
But it's fast moving. You need to put your hand up and go, oh God.
And then we'll drop whatever we need to drop to go and support. Nobody's left high and dry and without any support or guidance. But we just need the person to have the self-awareness. I think is probably the most important thing. To understand what is required, and when they're struggling, actually shout up. On us, it's important that we create a culture where people can do that. They're not frightened to put their hand up and say, I made a mistake, I've cocked up, or this hasn't gone right. That goes back to my engineer fail fast.
You have to. There's no point trying to build something for 6 months. That's just not going to work. The amount of money and time that goes into it.
I think in startup world, the days of spending 4 years designing, engineering and building and validating, certifying, it's gone. I just don't see it coming back. In the hardware world anyway, I think we went to market very, very early with pre-production units. Had we sat and done what the traditional route, so which is design and engineering 3-4 years, we would have failed because we'd have delivered a unit to market that didn't fix the market's needs. Going to the market very, very early with pre-production, we saw so many use cases that we'd never have anticipated. We thought we've got everything figured out. We would have missed loads. Can't tell you how much. It's just from even within the same sector, same industry. Just how some people use a unit compared to how others use a unit, and the knock-on effects, and whether the code can deal with that. And we would not have delivered a unit that would have been saleable.
So how did you gather that data then? Was it through current people who have failed, or was it through your own failures?
Through our own failures. I think it's you need very, very supportive early adopters, and you've got to work very closely with them. They're always going to be frustrating times for both sides. You have to bend over backwards to keep the customers happy. But knowing where the line is, that actually we've got to stop at some point and actually develop what we've got. And so it's always challenging. But I think on reflection, taking the path we did, as hard as it has been, Allo wouldn't be here after we'd not done that.
What do you think you guys are maybe doing a little bit differently at Allo than other companies in a similar situation? Because you guys have got very far compared to where you were even a year ago. It's crazy because it takes normally a company 3 to 5 years to get where you are right now. I think we were in revenue very early, and not small amounts of revenue either. And I think that I don't know of another startup that's done what we've done. In terms of revenue generation, and again alongside with the extremely supportive investors. The reality of it is we wouldn't exist if we'd not done that. So I think everybody's got to change the mindset on how they think startup world works. For my opinion anyway, especially if it's hardware or, you mentioned batteries. How many people have been stung by trying to set something up battery-wise? You can't imagine how quick people run when you mention it. There's lots of different reasons. I think why thinking outside the box, doing things differently pays off. The gamble and the risk is very much higher. Because
It is
super. But that, you've got to take risks.
Yeah.
People who don't take risks don't really get that far, do they?
And that kind of goes for the graduates. They're taking a risk because it's on a. This could affect the rest of their career. So it's got to be right for them, regardless of whether they choose to go into a corporate or choose to go into a startup. It's got to be right. They need to be sure. We need to be sure. Having that environment in which, if it's not right, we're all big grown-ups, we can say it's not right, and that works both ways. Because people do make mistakes, we'll do, and we can make wrong decisions on sometimes on what we think might be the right thing to do or the right path. Not being afraid to, hang on a minute, it's too much for me. You've got to have those honest conversations, again, both ways. But I think we spoke about it in the past. Hanging on to something thinking you're going to make it better when it's clear it's not going to get better.
I think there comes a point where you have to go, that's enough. It's just insane. But you guys are doing some really good stuff, and I know you're always working very hard.
You get it what you put out.
You do.
The team, I can't honestly, I like I said at the beginning, I consider I've built, my success is built on the teams I've built. Without them, I would never have got to where I have, and my reputation wouldn't be what it is. Immensely proud of them, all of them. And the team at Ally, genuinely, you've now seen the LinkedIn post. We do energy hustle.
I was about to say, you guys are amazing because you really shout about your employees, and you're not scared. I think a lot of startups don't do that because they're afraid people will try and poach them. But if you treat people well, they won't leave even if they are being poached.
No, that's it. I think you're looking for people that can invest into what they're doing. These places you're either all in or you're all out. There's no half measures. So I'm quite confident that the people we've got are all in. Some of the crazy shifts we've done recently, crazy weeks. It makes me proud. It's not sustainable forever, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't allow that to go on forever. It's got to be a very short window in the scheme of things that's going on. And I'm confident we're on that path. I do keep pushing it out a few weeks here and there, but I think as well as ever you can see the light on at the end of the tunnel, that those days are going to kind of come to it's the exception rather than the rule. You can get everybody on side and they can support you. But that's on us to make sure we do everything we need to do to bring that to reality.
Works both ways, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask just about. Do you want to go through to hiring, or shall we do? Talks about that. I'm just trying to think. Okay, so I always think when people come into startups, they have some great ideas before they join. Right? They go, "Oh, I can make this difference. I can do this. I can change that." How easy is it for engineers to come in who are established engineers, been in the business for, not in that business, but been around for like say 8 to 10 years, and then coming into a startup and then thinking, I have all these ideas that we can maybe change this and change that. Is it possible to hire people like that where they can actually make a real difference? Because I think people tend to confuse the two and go, I can make a real difference. But it's also, some people come with their own opinions and ideas and go, why are we doing it this way? I mean, have you had that before?
I have. There's a few points to pick up on there. I think it's an open forum. I'm more than prepared and happy to listen to anybody's ideas. Those are the ideas that get us moving forward. You can never be so arrogant, and the rest of the team can't be so arrogant to think they know everything. A fresh set of eyes usually brings the biggest wins. Now, what you have to do is make sure you control that, because what you can't allow is an environment, I guess, especially while cash is as tight as it is. What you can't do is forever change. Engineering communities in general are always striving for perfection. Having a very clear goal in terms of what is MVP. Because we can always iterate past MVP, but actually proof of concept. Does it work? Does it do what we need it to? That's enough. So what we do after with all the other ideas is then stick that on a roadmap, evaluate, is it actually going to bring us any value? Because the other side, you have to make sure whatever investment you're putting into whatever functionality is going to bring some kind of return, whether that be in terms of reliability and robustness or whether actually added value to the product. All of it's up for debate, all of it's up for discussion, but you have to be, make sure you're quite regimented in how you control it. It can't be a free-for-all. because all you end up doing is never actually throwing a unit out. You just splurge through cash.
Forever changing. Yeah. Do you find that with where you're working at the minute, or even Luna and startups, because I think it's really important for engineers to understand the cost of the reality of what you're doing.
Yep.
Do the engineers understand what costs are going into products or suppliers or what's going out? Do you think it's important for them to know?
I think yes, because without it, you think it's a limitless pot. You think you can aim for that perfection, and that's not to say we don't want to get there, because we definitely do. But you've got to be very measured and do it carefully, because again, going to that, you'll burn through all of your cash and deliver nothing. So, it's difficult, because I get, you want to go in and you want to be, all these ideas, brilliant. Please come tell us what they are. We definitely need to hear all about it, but don't be surprised when things don't get passed. Don't be,
because it's costly, right? Especially when you make changes.
I think what's most costly is not doing the foundational work. So the reality of going to university for a mechanical engineering degree and actually the real world are miles apart.
Yeah.
It stuns me sometimes that some of the stories I could tell you. And this is not a guy fresh out of university. He's been in the trade for a couple of years, maybe 10, 12 years.
Okay.
Long time. And there was a rule at Lunat. So as an engineer, if you built a component or designed a component, you were the first to build the first off.
Okay.
Yep. Some like that, some didn't. I always remember a conversation with a guy that had designed a significant part of the truck, and all those parts came in and go and build. And bear in mind, he designed all the fasteners that were going to go and hold it all together and everything. And for him to come and ask me what tool he needed to use to put a screw in surprised me a little bit, to say the least. But at that point, I didn't really understand, and it was made clear later. Much of it's theory rather than actually hands-on. So going back to your question about what do you look for in a, we're very keen on students that have done Formula Student, because it shows they've got a desire to get their hands dirty and understand how it goes together, and that's really important. None of this in this day and age is just sitting at a desk spinning CAD. None of it.
No, because you need to understand how it works with the wider system.
You do,
and
it doesn't just stop there. I've had arguments years ago in terms of my expectations when we design something. It's not just CAD, it's 2D drawings, it's general assembly drawings, it's bill of materials. Now, for engineering, that's not really bright lights and shiny. That's the boring stuff. But it's needed. You can't deliver a product unless you've done those. You can't deliver a component you might have designed unless you've done all of those things. So I think making clear what the expectations are, what is required to consider something released, and we're still going through that loop now, but making sure we've got all of the I call it the boring stuff. That's my forte. Everybody else can do all the shiny stuff. It does. And without it, you stop later on down the line, and stopping later on down the line, everybody knows, and it's written about in many, many books. The later you stop, the more it costs, and at that point, then it's usually shut the doors.
Yeah, it's like I say when a lot of engineers go, "Can I work from home?" I'm going, okay, you're a CAD engineer, and I know you can work from home, but there's no point you sitting away from the team for a week designing something, handing over and saying, this doesn't actually work.
It doesn't work.
You need to be in the thick of it and learn from other people, because how else would you I don't understand how people learn. You can't learn from sitting on your own.
And also that when I talked to you about being exposed to so many different things, sat at home, you're not going to be.
No, you're not going to hear things like you go, ooh.
And let's be very honest, the people on the shop floor building the product are the reason we've all got jobs. Without them, none of us have got a job.
No.
If they've got a problem, they need to be able to go and grab an engineer. They don't need to be waiting 2 days to get a video meeting or whatever it might be. I'm not a fan, and I know that's controversial in this day and age, but I am not a fan of remote working. It doesn't work. There might be some jobs out there that it's perfect for, but if you're working in the world of startups and engineering, to think you can remotely design something and deal with all of the issues that are going to crop up and do that remotely, if you think that, you're extremely naive.
I feel like it's more challenging working from home in that kind of environment.
I can't do it.
You would hate it because you're sat over things change so quickly. So you're designing one thing 1 hour, next hour it's completely
that goes back to the list. 5 minutes after you start work, the priorities have changed.
Exactly.
And that could be that there's you've got a customer that's saying, I need this, and if you can give me this, which is new functionality or new features, I'll buy units. As a business, we've got to do that. Might be going off a plan, but we've got to go down that road or at least investigate it. if you're not there, you're not going to be in that discussion. You're going to be excluded from having your say on the direction of the product or the company or whatever it might be.
Yeah. But also, if you're sat at home, especially when you're so early on in your career, you're not going to develop as fast as someone sat in.
Social skills as well.
Yeah.
We talk about being transparent and honest and open and how to communicate with each other. And I say to people all the time, there are some days where things might be going really wrong, and with the best will in the world, all of us sometimes act out of character.
Yeah.
We all might have an on-off day. The offer to everybody is, if I've done that, because I might not know, I might be so engrossed and deep in what it is I'm fighting at that moment in time, that but the offer is, you pull me to one side and you tell me, because I might not be aware, and we'll have an open discussion in a safe space and walk out of the room, it's done and finished. And again, it doesn't matter what level you are in a business, you need to be open to feedback and criticism. I think that's a thing that a lot of the younger generation struggle with.
But also a lot of founders struggle with that.
Yes, very much so.
Not like being told that they're wrong.
None of us like it.
No, we don't.
I think I can get really defensive at times if I can come right, and I have to take a step back. If I respond in the heat of the moment, the response is always going to be wrong. Always. Yeah. If I take a step back, the feedback's very rarely wrong. We can't see for the wood for the trees because of how deep we are in the trees. But the feedback's very rarely wrong. So I think having that maturity to be able to accept what's said, reflect on it, and then, okay, because 9 times out of 10 you will agree with what's been said.
Yeah, but you're just angry at that point in time, so you're like, how dare you?
Yes.
Okay, what would you suggest for engineers who want to work in a more, like yourself, like you said, like an environment where you're not just doing one tiny job? If they're already a graduate, they're working in a company, and maybe they've got 3-4 years experience, and they're bored, they want to work for a startup. Okay. Would you hire someone who doesn't have all the skills but has the capability? It's
behaviours to me. Yeah. Genuinely, I've got to say, and I won't say it because it's the language is not good, but I think for me, anybody can be trained to do anything. Yeah. It might take some people longer than others, but anybody can train to do anything. If your mindset is wrong and your attitude is wrong, and you haven't got the right behavioural traits, then that will never leave you. You'll never move forward because of the, whether it be pig-headedness, whether it be because you think you're always right. None of us are right all the time. I get things wrong every single day.
We have to be right, but we're not always right.
No. I think I'm more than open to, and I think I would strongly encourage anybody, you've got to give people a chance, and it's not about what's on the CV. I hate looking at CVs, despise it. I get far more from speaking to somebody, whether it be on a video call and then getting them in a meeting personally, because I think, again, those are two very different experiences. Speak to somebody on a video call, think, sound really good, really promising. You get them in, and sometimes it's nerves, and you can usually see through that, but without both of those things, I would certainly have made some pretty catastrophic hires in my time. You need to meet people, you need to look them in the whites of the eyes, and they need to do the same for us.
It's a body language. You can tell from people when they're in and how comfortable they feel, because you can make them feel at ease pretty easily. 5-10 minutes in, show them around, they get a feel for it, and it just becomes a bit more personal, doesn't it?
It does.
That's why I stopped doing video interviews, because so many people are just being biased based on that, and I just thought, this is not going to work anymore. It's just insane. But face to face, I always say to everybody, never accept an offer, and if you've been on site, you've seen the place and the people, because you can be told so many things on the call. If you go on site, it's totally different, and the people you're working with, you don't even like. And you're just like, I can't
do this.
No.
I think it's really important. That's a good point in that. Go into where it is that you're looking at. Speaking to the people. Asking difficult questions, because if they're too afraid to answer the questions, then that's a bit of a red flag. But you should expect transparency. You should expect honesty. It's a minimum requirement for anybody going into any environment or any organisation. The basics, and if you don't feel you're going to get that, then I'd run a mile. That's just being who I am. And sometimes we have to deal with difficult news. Sometimes transparency is not good because it unsettles us, but you need to be able to handle it. I'd rather be told. I've been in environments where I wasn't told situations, and having invested as much as I had, and I'm not being negative in any way, so I don't want it to come across that way, but I might not have been able to do anything to affect the outcome or the eventual outcome, but not to be given the opportunity to try and do something, especially given what we had delivered. I found that tough to take. So, again, going into Jonathan and I are very much aligned on, say it as it is, very frank, very open, very honest. The right people can handle that. The right people might have a bit of a wobble, but then, actually take stock, come back and, right, well, what do we need to do?
Yeah. We're going to plug in Ally here a little bit. So why would people want to come and work for you guys?
I think, going back to that, I think we are so close. And as a startup, 99% of them fail. We are so close. Are we out of the trees yet? No, definitely not. There's still lots of challenges in front of us, and these last hurdles are the most difficult. But if you want an environment where it's, there's a challenge every day and the new challenges every day, mixed in with what you're expected to deliver as the basics, that you couldn't ask for a best place. And as I said already with the team, I've never been as proud of a team as the one I've built, not just but Jonathan and I.
I think all your teams, the people, my people I speak to over at Alistair as well, and from day one of me working there, they've always said, this is great. I've never had a bad word been said, like your management style, the way you are. I always say the word fair. He's very, very fair in everything he does when he says, and you're honest. So
I think that's done. Somebody made a comment a few years back. They were pleased and surprised in this day and age that the exact words were, "It's very clear you build teams in your shadow." You have to be invested. I couldn't think of anything worse than working in an environment or for a company that I didn't love. I didn't want. I couldn't invest. I couldn't get my teeth into and wasn't attached to. And sometimes that takes time, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't imagine anything worse. And the reality is, as a leader and somebody that the people look up to, you lead by example. We have had many crazy late nights. I can guarantee one thing: we'll be there with you. I will be there with you. And I've still got another 2.5-3 hour drive home after that. But you can't expect people to do what you're not prepared to do yourself. We're not in the day and age where everybody in the office in the top seats bugger off at 5 o'clock. It just doesn't work, and that's not the environment in this day and age in which any startup will be successful. Everybody has to dig in. Doesn't matter what your job role is, doesn't matter what your title is or where you sit in the organisation. Everybody has to dig in. Everybody has to be pulling in the same direction. Without it won't work.
If you were to start a startup, your own startup, let's just say, where would you start? So what would be like the key things that you would do first? Because everyone has their ways of doing things, right? And you've been through it, what's good, what's bad. What advice would you give to other founders?
I think you need to be very clear on what is the minimum, because if it's your baby, you're always going to be striving for excellence, and you should. But you need to temper that with what is the minimum I need to go to market with. What is the minimum I need to go and get some, consumer surveys on, or get some feedback on from the market. You have to be clear and have to be very resolute in that, because the easiest thing in the world is just to keep going and developing. It's time for that. You can iterate after. But actually, how am I going to prove this concept? How am I going to get the feedback that will then give investors confidence? Going back to that boring stuff, the best thing you can ever do is get somebody who thrives in the boring stuff to go along with you on it. Because without setting those foundations, laying those foundations that in most cases are nothing to do with the product you're developing. It's about putting the business processes in place, making sure you've done your health and safety. All these things get overlooked. You work in many startups, and it's fair to say the people that work in startups from the very, very beginning are very rarely the same people that have got the right set of skills, behaviours and attitudes to take it through to scale. They're two different people. So also understanding when that point is and not being afraid to make decisions that are really, really difficult given what somebody might have done to that point. The business will suffer if you don't make the tough calls. Most people recognise it before it gets to uncomfortable conversations, so again, not easy conversations to have, and it's not an easy situation to be in. But as a founder starting a new business, you can't be afraid to make changes when it's required. You have to do it for the right reasons. It has to be, and also protect everybody. You don't want to go and burn bridges, but just being very realistic about where we are, where the people are, and actually does it still work?
Yeah.
If it doesn't, just cut it, because it's not. It will cost you more money, it will cost you time, it will cost you a lot of pain further on down the road if you're not wise enough to understand when that point is. So I think being, uber aware of who's around you, what they're doing, but crucially, I'll go back to having somebody sat at the side of you that thrives and does all of the things in the background that nobody else wants to do. That's got to be done. Yeah.
Would you? I see a lot of startups also hire a lot of C-suite execs to start with. So you've got a CEO, you've got a CTO, you've got everything C-suite, and it's very top heavy.
Yeah.
From your perspective, and I've heard different ideas on this, or people's thoughts, should I say. Some say it's necessary to have certain names in a business to be able to get further investment and do it for that reason. I haven't really done that, which is great in a way. I mean, I know you had a few founders initially to start with, but do you think it matters who you have in the business to gain that investment? Like, what's your take on that?
I think it depends on the type of business it is. The easiest thing in the world and the natural thing to do is, especially when there are multiple founders, is to, we all want a C-suite.
Yeah.
I've got a problem with that. If you're founding a business and you're wanting to set it up on the best footing for success, it doesn't matter what your title is.
No.
I genuinely don't care what my title is. I couldn't give a toss.
Yeah.
I'm there to do a job, and I'm there to try and make that business work and be successful. Everything else is a byproduct and a nice to have. I can't imagine as being a founder or part of a group that were setting the business up where my discussion would be about, I want to be CTO or want to have a C title.
Yeah.
I think there's too much onus placed on titles. The proof's in the pudding. What did you deliver? What are you delivering? Because the rest of it means nothing. You could have as many C-suite titles on your CV or on LinkedIn or whatever it might be, but if all of them were failures, that says a lot. So I think for me it shouldn't matter, and I do believe many startups are way too top heavy, and that is for all of the reasons you've just said. The investment community actually, I think, needs to wake up a little bit. Do you want people who are doing and getting it done?
You need hands-on people like that, not people who just sit there and.
Yeah, and the challenge is, you're always we bring some appointments, and if you go out to market and try and get a 20-year CTO or whether it be COO or whatever the role be at a C-suite, you are very unlikely to get somebody who understands how startups work. And chances are, when you bring that person in, it's going to cause massive conflict because there's very little appreciation for. The easiest thing to do when you walk into a new business is that, have you not done that? And you've not done that. We know, but we've done this, and this. That's not to say it's not on any roadmap, but you can't walk in and then immediately think that there's a right to criticise, and because you've not lived the journey to get to that point, and you have to cut your cloth accordingly. I'm quite fortunate. When questions have been asked, I've got loads of different things started, so it shows me my thinking and where I know we need to go. But I think it's a really big positive that I've not decided that I'm going to go off and spend 2 months doing business process mapping, and it's not required just yet. I know it's there, the basics are there, but it's not the right time at this time to start going and expanding on those. So I think that leaves you then in a world where you're looking for somebody that's got the ambition. So when we talk about graduates and being ambitious and wanting to get exposure, that leaves startups then having to go to market, and it's a challenge. It's really difficult to go out and find somebody that's not at that level but has got what you think might be the ambition and also the possible skill set to get to that point. It's difficult. It's hard work.
It is.
And you're going to make mistakes, but you've got to act on those mistakes quick.
You do. I think I've worked with a couple of companies where you've had people come in from very well-known companies, and they've come into startups and they're trying to build the same processes, systems, but there's no product. And they're hiring loads of people, and you haven't got anything that works yet. You don't need an ERP system if you haven't got a product that works. It's little things like that. It's like, it's insane. And some people learn a bit too late.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just a recruiter, but I can see the mistakes being made. I'm like, you don't need to hire so many people.
I think we've all lived it and witnessed it at some point. I've got some pretty horrific stories of that, I won't go into detail, but you know, again, for founders, bringing somebody in at a higher level, have to be very, very careful that bringing that person in doesn't destroy the culture that you've built. It's the easiest thing in the world to do, because I've witnessed it, I've seen it, it's not nice, it's not a good place to be. It's probably the most important, if they're going to bring somebody in at that level, the most important hire they will do, because you have to find somebody that's the right cultural fit. You have to find somebody that's going to come in and actually enhance the team, not try and pick fault in it. And it's great to pick fault. I'm not saying you can't, because you've got to, we have to be open and we have to be grown up enough to know that we've made some mistakes and we might not have done something we needed to do. But it's easy to, especially when potentially, and I'm not trying to be negative here, but if you're bringing somebody in that doesn't understand startup world, or somebody that's spent a life in a corporate
even
environment,
a smaller business, sometimes it works.
You'll kill the company quicker than anything, and at that point all those teams that you've built will lose faith, they will fall out of love with what they're trying to do, and before you know it collapses. So that's really important,
and that's not fun for anyone.
No, definitely
at all.
No.
Always, from my experience, people who bootstrap are a bit more careful with their money and how they build.
Depends. It tells if you're northern as well.
Compared to, if you've just been throwing millions, like, it's not. And this is AI tech founder I'm working with at the minute, and he has not gone and built a massive team. He's had a couple of people, a few engineers doing the actual work, and he's done it all himself, but he still works in a full-time job himself. And the way that I'm just like, why do other startups not do it this way? It's just...
Do you know what I've got to say? So, I won't mention company names, but I interview people frequently in which, they'll say on the CV that they've worked in a startup, some of the bigger startups.
I know what something else.
And for me, you haven't. If you've raised in an early round in 10 million plus, or whatever it might be, whatever figure on it you want to, you're not in a startup. You might have been in a startup 5 years ago, but in this day and age that is not a startup. And people have worked in lots of these organisations and think they've worked in a startup. Startup is tough. Startup is, we haven't got a pot to pee in. We are uber careful about how we spend the money, and some of this is from past experience. Do we need to go out and spend whatever it means, 30-40 grand on DC tooling? No, not yet. Well, there might be a time in the future when we do, but do we go and do it now just because we've got the money? No, because tomorrow might need that money to go out and do something else. So you can't, the splurging cash on coffee machines and free lunches and all this thing, posh toilets. And I'm not being disrespectful, but that's
it's not the same.
That's actually in my mind, it's misconduct. You're wasting money on things that are not going to make that product work. It doesn't, everything should be solely laser focused on delivering a product that's going to generate revenue. When that company grows and you're generating lots of revenue, there's time for all of that later.
They need time to treat your employees and things like that. I think a lot of companies do that because it's like, oh, hey, look at this shiny company, they've got all this stuff, come and work for us with this 20% increase in your salary, and then they go out, and then when it goes to crap, they go back into the market, and you're just like, they're not going to get the same money.
You're not, and I think that's the other thing. As a founder and as a person who hires people to come and work in a startup, I mentioned earlier, I spend as much time telling people how horrific and bad it is. You've got to be that way, and if that doesn't put somebody off, then the chances are they're right for the business. And the ones that it does put off, then it's not, because you can't romanticize this environment. It's not romantic. It's not fun. But you've got a responsibility to be very clear on what it's like. We've had times when it's been incredibly tough. Is it going to work? Are we going to get over the line? And it always does, because we're resilient and we're tenacious, and we will make sure we get it there. We are not prepared to let this business fail, and we won't let this business fail. There's been some extremely tough times, and I'm sure there won't be the end of them. But I think you learn so much from each of them, and know better how to deal with it next time round. So you can't be romantic about it. If you want to, if you're a gambling man, if you are or lady, and want to genuinely give yourself the best opportunity of doing something different, being innovative, being part of something that's new to market. These are the places to be. But come in with your eyes wide open. Genuinely, it's going to be the toughest experience you'll ever have in your life. The rewards are huge.
It is, because you feel like you've actually achieved something. You're not just, you know exactly what impact you're having on the business doing what you're doing, whether you're making a mistake or whether you've done something amazing.
It's that adage I say frequently. When we said earlier about people not being afraid to shout about when they made a mistake. And for a few reasons. I don't want to make the same mistake tomorrow that you made today because you didn't tell me. And the other one, I am a very optimistic person, and I say that, but this next statement is the opposite in some ways. My feeling is, when people say, "Oh, it's all right, nothing's going wrong," I guarantee it is. I promise you it is. You're just not looking in the right place. You're not looking hard enough. So again, not being afraid to go looking for what might be wrong. Which is probably,
people don't like to dig because they like to dig too much, then we'll find something wrong. But the quicker you find it,
if you bury it, it's going to come out and bite you.
Your customers.
So don't be afraid to put your head above the parapet. Nobody's going to shoot you for doing so. I celebrate it. We celebrate it. It's we only as a company will get better and learn from the mistakes and learn from the issues that are cropping up. If people are one, shouting about mistakes, two, looking for things that might not be right, and being very regimented when it comes to, okay, so what have we got to do to fix it? Again, going back to the MVP thing, your likelihood of you being able to have a permanent fix in place very quick is low. But what is the minimum we've got to do to make this stuff can continue to switch on tomorrow and do what it needs to do whilst we look for a permanent fix? But you only get that when you go to market really early and you get the opportunity to iterate and make things better.
I love this. Learned so much from you today. It's nice to catch up. Is there anything you would leave? If we were to say one last thing about your career today, right now, what would you say is the most proudest moment you've had?
That's tough because there's a few.
You give me a few if you want.
I said it earlier. The team that we've built at Lunas. I think to each and every person that was there, whether that be manufacturing, engineering, stores outfit, was incredible. Production and the teams that we've got on, prototype engineers and technicians. I was incredibly proud of the trucks that we put on the market at the time. Really was beyond proud. We put something together on a budget far less than an OEM that outperformed at that time every other truck in its class on the market. Great, amazing. It's such a shame it didn't quite get to where it needed to be. But then I think I'm driven by my own personal goals, and that is I want to take us, not for recognition from anybody else, it's for me. I want to be part of a startup that goes from startup to scale, that bucks the trend. And that's just for my own self-gratification, my own self-reward.
And you don't quit. You're not a quitter.
No.
Even when things get tough, you're like, I'm going to hang in there. We're going to get over the line.
You know what? If you walk away from something and if you quit, don't get me wrong. And I'm not beating up on people that do. Everybody does for their own reasons, and they need to stand behind the decision they made. I would always live with the what if. And that the fear of living with what if would not allow me to quit. It's not in the makeup, it's not, I just couldn't do it. I think, if you choose to do something, you invest in it, you've got to try and see it through to the end, and you should do everything in your power to make sure you do. Sorry.
No, definitely. I think there was a company I was working with that, unfortunately it's not around anymore, but I placed someone there a few years back, and he was still there up until maybe 6-7 months ago. But when I approached him, he was in a job, but I was very transparent. I said, look, the company have got like a runway of 8 weeks. They're waiting for investment to come. It might happen, it might not. But I was honest with people. And they still took the job. They went for the interview, they got the job. And they were there. And then there was a reshuffle. and then I'll place them somewhere else. But I always feel like you said, if you're honest with people and they know what they're walking into, it's their decision to do it.
The reality of it is, if you're working in a startup, it doesn't matter what your runway is.
Yeah.
An investor can get trigger happy at any point for whatever reason. If you've missed milestones, if there's been an issue with the product, for whatever reason, there's a multitude, and you can't blame them, because if it was my cash and I was investing, I'd do exactly the same thing, but it doesn't matter how long your runway is, it could go wrong tomorrow. And you have to be very much aware of that. And for me, it's a bit of a flag when somebody comes in and if they immediately start talking about runway, they've got a right to ask, and you need to be very open and transparent. But if your sole focus is this job secure and I'm going to be in it for 2 years, I can't make that guarantee to anybody, and I wouldn't, and it'd be foolish of me to do so. It would be a lie. My integrity is worth far more. So I think being honest and saying to people, and I do say, if you are coming here looking for long-term security,
that's not going to happen.
I can't do it. But if you're coming here and you want to try and invest in that, and you want to try and be part of that long-term security building, then this is the place for you. But you can't make any guarantees, because you never ever know what's around the corner. Anything. It could be reputation. It could be. You only need one thing to go wrong, really wrong.
Something to blow up.
But you can't assume that it's not going to happen, and you probably need to assume it is going to go wrong, and have that mindset, because then it's not as challenging when you get to those problems. That doesn't mean that they're insurmountable, you can't get over them, but it's certainly going to make it tougher.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
I love having conversations with you. I always learn so much.